Um, Imagine for a second that you're looking at the blueprint of an entire country's economic miracle.
Right.
A boom that has lasted for 3 solid decades, right? Lifting millions into the middle class, building these sprawling tech campuses, and basically creating a globally dominant industry.
Yeah, a massive, massive machine.
Exactly. But now, consider what happens when the very foundation of that multi-billion-dollar machine is just suddenly threatened. And not by a cheaper competitor in another time zone.
No, not at all.
Not by changing trade tariffs either, but by software.
Yeah.
By lines of code that can do the exact same work instantly without ever needing a coffee break or, a performance review or a paycheck.
It's wild to think about.
It really is. And that is the massive global shift we are looking at today.
Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, and you are joining us for a deep dive into a really incredibly insightful piece of writing by Johan Steyn. I'm joined today by our resident tech and economics expert.
Hey everyone, great to be here. So just to give you all a quick overview, Johan Steyn is a prominent AI thought leader and author. And in his recent work, he's put forward a concept that basically fundamentally rewrites the rules of global business.
Yeah, he really pulls no punches here.
Right. His main argument is that the traditional era of labor-based outsourcing, the model that built these massive IT services sectors in places like India, is effectively over. And it's being replaced by something he calls algorithm arbitrage.
Which is a brilliant term, by the way.
It is.
Okay.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the implications here go way beyond just one country or one industry. This is really about the future of how work is valued.
Absolutely. Because we all know the traditional playbook, right? For the last 30 years or so, the global outsourcing industry was built on this concept of labor arbitrage.
Moving the work across borders.
Exactly. Moving work geographically to capitalize on wage differentials and scale. If a big multinational corporation needed, say, thousands of customer service calls answered, or massive back-end IT infrastructures maintained.
They didn't hire locally.
Right. They tapped into these incredibly deep, highly educated talent pools in places like Bangalore, Hyderabad, or Manila. They got high-quality work and intense process discipline at a fraction of the cost.
And the unit of value being sold there was human effort.
Yes. Measured in time, headcount, capacity. But Steyn points out that this underlying logic is just breaking down now.
Because the new threat isn't that another country has suddenly produced a cheaper human workforce. The threat is that we don't need the human workforce for those specific tasks at all.
Exactly. Algorithm arbitrage is a fundamental shift in the economic equation. It is no longer about finding a cheaper human to do the work. It is about replacing the labor entirely because an AI system can perform the task instantly.
Instantly and at scale.
Massive scale. And at a near zero marginal cost.
That near zero marginal cost is the crucial part, isn't it?
It is the kill switch for the old model. Once an AI model is trained and deployed, asking it to process one financial document or 1 million financial documents, it basically costs the same in terms of compute power.
You just can't compete with that.
You can't. You cannot compete with near zero marginal cost using human labor, no matter where in the world that labor is located or how little they get paid.
We should probably pinpoint exactly what kind of work we are talking about here. Because when you hear about automation, people often picture like a sci-fi scenario where high-level executives or creative directors are getting replaced.
Right. The robots taking over the boardroom.
Exactly. But Steyn sources highlight a very different target area.
What's fascinating here is that the most exposed work is absolutely not the highly strategic, glamorous part of IT. It's the engine room. It is the middle of the service machine.
The repetitive stuff.
Yeah. Steyn specifically lists things like ticket handling, basic coding, report drafting, document processing, data cleanup, standard customer interactions, and regression testing.
I actually want to pause on regression testing for a second, because I think that is a perfect example of what is changing under the hood. For anyone listening who might be unfamiliar, regression testing is basically checking to see if a new software update accidentally broke an old feature.
Which happens all the time.
All the time. And it is notoriously tedious.
Oh, it's brutal. Historically, whenever a company updated their app or their internal system, they needed a team of human testers to manually click through hundreds of screens.
Just clicking, filling out forms, verifying that the checkout button still works.
Exactly.
Right.
Verifying that the whole thing didn't crash. It wasn't doubly strategic for the client, but it was absolutely necessary to keep the business running. And because it was necessary and voluminous, It was highly valuable as an outsourced service.
Outsourcing firms made huge margins off that.
Huge margins. They did it by throwing thousands of smart, well-trained humans at these massive volumes of repeatable work.
But now an AI can run those regression tests in seconds.
Seconds.
It can simulate thousands of user interactions across every operating system simultaneously, so the sheer volume of the work is no longer a moat that protects the outsourcing firm. AI just takes those exact tasks and turns them into a built-in feature of the software itself.
Right, rather than a billable service provided by an external vendor.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We aren't just talking about abstract theories or, predictions for the year 2030. The shift from labor arbitrage to algorithm arbitrage is happening right now in the market.
It is.
But I'm curious about the actual proof. Like, how fast is this transition actually showing up in the real-world data?
The numbers are staggering. To give you an idea of how fast this is moving, Steyn cites a January 2026 report from Computer World.
Okay.
They looked at a 9-month period for India's large IT firms, the absolute giants of the industry. Over those 9 months, these massive firms added a net total of just 17 employees.
Wait, 17?
17.
As in 17 total.
Total. Net new hires.
In an industry that normally hires by the tens of thousands, how is that even mathematically possible if the tech sector is supposedly in the middle of a massive generative AI boom?
I know it sounds like a typo, but it is the reality of algorithm arbitrage. That statistic perfectly illustrates how automation is rapidly shrinking these manpower-heavy models.
Because historically, revenue growth was tied directly to headcount.
Inextricably linked. If a firm won a massive new enterprise contract, they immediately went out and hired 500 or 1,000 new graduates to fulfill it. That was the only way to scale the operation.
So you are saying that Link is just broken now? They are taking on the new contracts, but they're fulfilling them with software instead of new hires.
That is exactly what the data shows. Steyn references a January 2026 Business Today report that completely confirms this decoupling. The traditional link between winning new deals and needing to add headcount is officially weakening.
You're doing more with the same amount of people.
Or fewer people. These firms are using AI to reshape how they staff and redeploy their existing talent. They are taking on more work and infinitely more complex work without expanding their human footprint.
Which means when attrition happens?
Right. People leave, they retire, they move on. And instead of backfilling those junior roles with new hires, the firm simply automates the workload. Hence, a net addition of just 17 people across these massive, massive organizations.
The ripple effects of that decoupling must be immense, especially when you look at the pipeline of new talent coming out of universities. I mean, millions of people study engineering specifically for these jobs.
The impact on the talent pipeline is profound. We see this in the NASSCOM coverage reported by Reuters and Mint.
And NASSCOM is the premier trade body for the tech industry in India, right?
Correct. They are the voice of the industry. Now, they are still projecting a 6% growth for the tech sector in the 2026 fiscal year, so the industry is still growing financially.
Right, they're still making money.
Driven by AI-led services and the expansion of global capability centers, those big in-house hubs that multinational companies build for their own operations. But NASSCOM openly acknowledges the threat of disruption from advanced AI tools. They specifically note that campus hiring has come down significantly from where it used to be.
So the traditional mass recruitment drives at engineering colleges just aren't happening at the same scale. The outsourcing firms aren't rolling up with buses to hire entire graduating classes anymore.
They aren't, which brings a very stark reality to the forefront. And this is highlighted by the South African tech publication Tech Central, which Steyn includes in his analysis.
What's their take?
They point out that AI is actively breaking the traditional pathways of employment. It is forcing companies, and really entire economies, to completely rethink the link between university degrees and employment.
Because if the massive outsourcing firms are no longer acting as this default sponge, absorbing tens of thousands of fresh graduates every year because an algorithm can do that entry-level data processing, then what is the immediate value of that entry-level degree?
Exactly. Companies are being forced to radically reassess what gets automated versus what truly requires a human touch.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. If the outsourcing firms are shedding jobs and automating these tasks, aren't they just becoming more efficient versions of themselves? Like, are they really in danger, or is there a bigger threat here? Who is their actual competitor in this new landscape?
That is the million-dollar question. The biggest competitor to an outsourcing firm isn't a rival outsourcing firm across the street. The deeper risk is what Steyn calls disintermediation.
Disintermediation,
Right.
cutting out the middleman entirely.
Exactly. The real competitor is the client's own internal AI stack.
The client is just buying the software directly and bringing the work back in-house.
Yes. Steyn paints a very clear picture of how this plays out in the real world. Imagine a large global bank. For years, they've contracted an outsourcing firm to handle their back office processing, their customer inquiries, their quality assurance.
Right, standard BPO contract.
But now, that bank starts equipping its own internal domestic staff with AI co-pilots and agentic workflow tools.
We should define agentic workflow tools for a second, because I feel like we hear about AI chatbots all the time, but this is different.
Very different. An AI chatbot generates text or answers questions. Agentic workflow tools or AI agents actually have the agency to act on your behalf.
They do the clicking.
Right. They don't just draft an email. They log into your company's CRM, they update a client's record, cross-reference a compliance database, and trigger a refund, all autonomously.
So an internal bank employee who used to be able to handle, say, 10 complex cases a day using traditional software can suddenly handle 50 or 100 cases a day because the AI agent is doing all the heavy lifting, hunting down the data, and filling out the forms in the background.
Their productivity skyrockets. And when that happens, the bank simply needs fewer outsourced hours. The uncomfortable truth for the traditional IT services sector is that they are no longer just competing on price or process efficiency against other vendors.
They're competing against the software platforms.
Software that their clients can buy directly.
Yeah.
The client looks at the vendor and thinks, why should I pay you for 10,000 hours of human labor over the next 6 months when I can buy an enterprise license for an AI agent that empowers my existing team to clear this backlog by Friday?
You cannot hide a structural shift of that magnitude from the investors. Wall Street must be paying very close attention to how these legacy firms are reacting.
Oh, the markets are definitely watching. Steyn points to a March 2026 Barron's report noting that AI fears have weighed heavily on IT services firms. Investors are looking at these legacy staffing models, the ones built on massive human capacity and billable hours, and they are getting nervous.
Makes sense.
The transition from labor arbitrage to algorithm arbitrage is creating a very distinct divide between winners and losers.
How does the Barron's analysis define the winners in this scenario? Because somebody has to win.
Survival in this new era means building defensible intellectual property and AI-native delivery models. You cannot just be a body shop anymore. You can't rely on the legacy model of renting out human time.
The firms that win will be the ones that actually own the algorithms.
Or at least have highly specialized proprietary ways of implementing them that a client couldn't easily replicate internally.
So what does this all mean? If you are leading one of these massive tech giants today, or if you are a policymaker in an economy deeply reliant on services, how do you actually survive this transition?
Well, Steyn points out that simply slapping a new label on your website and saying, we are using AI, is a cosmetic, deeply flawed strategy.
Right. Everyone is doing that.
Exactly. It's not enough to just use the tool. You have to change what you are selling. The true strategic pivot requires a fundamental shift in the business model itself. Providers must move from selling time, meaning headcount and capacity, to selling outcomes.
The death of the billable hour.
That is the death of the billable hour as the primary unit of value.
Let's visualize that shift for you. Under the old model, if a client has a massive backlog of unorganized data that needs to be migrated to a new cloud system, the outsourcer approaches the problem with human volume. They say, we will put 50 people on this for 6 months and bill you for every hour they work.
Right. And the client pays for the time, regardless of how efficient the process actually is.
But in the era of algorithm arbitrage, the client is highly educated on the technology. They know that 30%, maybe even 50% of that routine data migration can be entirely automated.
So if the provider still tries to sell them thousands of human hours, the client is going to demand massive price reductions. They'll push back and say, look, I know an LLM is doing the heavy lifting here. I am not paying human rates for server processing time.
The provider has to change the conversation entirely to protect their margins.
Yeah.
They have to stop talking about the input, the hours, and start talking about the output.
Yes. They have to say, we aren't going to bill you for the hours it takes. We are going to bill you for the completed verified database migration. We are going to guarantee a 99.9% accuracy rate, full regulatory compliance, and we will deliver it in 3 weeks instead of 6 months.
You are selling the result, the speed, the accuracy, and the improved customer experience.
And you are taking on the risk of execution. If your AI tools are sophisticated enough, your profit margins can actually improve, even as you deliver a faster, better product to the client. But it requires entirely new contract structures, new quality controls, and a completely different sales pitch.
That is a tough pivot for a legacy company.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this transition from selling time to selling outcomes is a flashing warning sign for every single services economy in the world.
Steyn specifically points out his home country, doesn't he?
He does. He points out South Africa and its massive ambitions in the business process outsourcing sector.
Because South Africa has spent years positioning itself as a premium destination for global call centers. They offer English-speaking talent, a strong cultural affinity with the UK and the US, and very favorable time zones.
They do. But if algorithm arbitrage becomes the new global logic, then simply offering a lower cost or a favorable time zone isn't going to cut it anymore.
An AI voice agent doesn't care what time zone it's in.
It doesn't need sleep. It can speak with perfect cultural nuance, and its cost is near zero. The geographic advantage evaporates completely.
So how does a country compete then?
Future competitiveness for these economies won't come from cost arbitrage. It will come from trust, from governance, from deep domain expertise, and from the proven ability to run AI-enabled operations safely.
Clients will pay a premium to a partner who can manage the complex AI systems, ensure strict data security, and navigate the shifting regulatory landscape.
Exactly. That is how a country moves up the value chain.
There is one more layer to this that feels like the most difficult systemic challenge to solve. Think about how any professional industry works. You enter at the bottom. You do the repetitive junior-level tasks.
You pay your dues.
Right. You do the data entry, you draft the basic reports, you run those tedious regression tests we talked about.
And by doing those routine tasks, you learn the business. You learn how the legacy code works. You learn what the client expects. You learn the hidden quirks of the database. That entry-level role is your training ground.
It's like trying to hire a Michelin star executive chef, but you've fully automated the prep kitchen.
That's a great way to put it.
Where do they learn how to chop the onions? How do they learn the rhythm of a dinner service? If AI is now consuming all of those junior tasks, if the algorithm arbitrage model completely hollows out the bottom of the employment pyramid, how do you create a senior developer with 10 years of complex problem-solving experience?
You don't. The industry faces a massive crisis of development. There are no entry-level jobs for junior developers to cut their teeth on. The industry desperately needs to invent new pathways for graduates to learn, contribute, and progress because the old apprenticeship model of doing the grunt work is rapidly disappearing.
You need the senior experts to manage the complex AI systems, but you are automating away the very roles that historically created those experts.
It brings home the reality that survival in this new era requires total structural reinvention. You cannot just hope the old model holds out for another quarter.
When you synthesize all these sources, the narrative is crystal clear. Labor arbitrage, the physical movement of work to find cheaper human hands, built an incredible era of global economic growth. It transformed nations and built massive corporate empires.
It did. But algorithm arbitrage is building the next era. The routine, necessary work of the global economy is fundamentally becoming software.
This raises an important question, and it's something I really want to leave you, the listener, to think about as you navigate this changing landscape. We have talked about how algorithm arbitrage brings the marginal cost of execution down to near zero, and how the need for massive human headcount is shrinking rapidly.
Right.
If executing routine tasks at a massive scale is no longer a competitive advantage, and you no longer need an army of entry-level workers to get things done, are we about to see the rise of the micro-multinational?
Micro-multinational, that completely flips the script on what a global business looks like. You wouldn't need a massive campus or a sprawling HR department at all. Think about the mechanics of it. We could be looking at a future dominated by tiny, hyper-efficient companies made up of just a handful of brilliant senior experts. Armed with massive, sophisticated AI stacks and agentic workflows, these micro-teams could theoretically orchestrate global operations, manage complex supply chains, or deliver enterprise-grade software.
They could effectively outcompete the traditional tech giants that are still weighed down by legacy infrastructure and overhead.
If the algorithm does the heavy lifting, the physical size of your company suddenly doesn't matter nearly as much as the quality of your AI and the strategic expertise of your core team.
It is a massive paradigm shift. A team of 5 people operating with the output of 5,000. That is exactly the kind of perspective shift we aim for here. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Johan Steyn's work. We hope this exploration of algorithm arbitrage has given you a new lens through which to view the news, your industry, and the future of your own career. Keep questioning the old models, keep looking for those hidden shifts, and most importantly, keep seeking out those aha moments in the world around you.